38 years ago, Professor Graeme embarked on a very personal quest to help the deaf hear.
Dad was quite severely hearing impaired, and I was really quite embarrassed for him.
It took determination, hard work and self-belief. It was a goal that many thought couldn't and even shouldn't be pursued. In developing the cochlear ear implant, Professor Graeme ran into a wall of criticism. But his dream is now a reality for more than 100,000 grateful people around the world. Graeme it's lovely to meet you.
It's great to be here, Peter.
Thanks for coming on Talking Heads.
Thank you.
What was it like, that moment when you realised that what you'd helped create, what you'd been central to creating, was making someone hear after they'd lost their hearing?
I did try to be a real scientist and keep my hopes down so that I could be objective about the whole procedure. But in the end, it was just too much. And when he heard speech for the first time, which most people around the world said was impossible, I couldn't hold it back any longer, and I did what's not very Australian male. I burst into tears of joy.
What did this first patient hear? What was the first signal that got through, if you like?
Well, the first time was a simple, straightforward rhythm of music. We'd play him God Save the Queen. See if could he get the rhythm on one single electrode. And Rod Saunders got it. We knew he'd got it because he stood up, as we did in those days when the national anthem was played, and pulled all the leads out of the equipment, and so we have no record of it. But then, just after that, we played him We'll Sing Matilda, and he sang it for us. That was great. It was a significant step forward, but it had been achieved before. The big breakthrough was, could he hear speech? Could we use these many electrodes that we decided to use that resulted from my initial research work and get him to understand speech? Because that's what he and all the patients wanted.
Through human history, this million years of human history, there's been a barrier between those that can hear and those that can't. And you've been part of a team that's given people more than hope. You've given them this moment, this opportunity to be part of the hearing world.
When I started in 1970 at the Eye and Ear Hospital, if I had told them, someone then, that I'd be being interviewed by you about this, and that it was a major breakthrough, they'd have said I was lunatic.
Do you want the green?
Yeah.
Green, please, Mum.
Please take Mum.
I do feel very specially moved to realise that we're giving them a life that enables them to develop their true potential in our society, which is, after all, a hearing society.
Where's the mummy bird?
I was born in Camden, New South Wales, on the 16th of August, 1935. I am told I was a high-maintenance child. In fact, I would be up at 4 or 5 in the morning, and these new parents would have to take me out and about in a stroller just to keep me occupied. My mother was a very creative lady. My father was more the level-headed, more good manager person, very nice with public relations. You have to be in a pharmacy. Dad had a great effect on me in many ways. He was hearing impaired, quite severely hearing impaired, and I was really quite embarrassed for him. And I think Dad was trying to encourage me to do medicine. He let me have some free range of his dispensary. You could get sulphur and all sorts of explosive mixtures that I could actually play around with. I started school a little bit later than the average, but it seemed that I was a bit ahead of all the children in my class. So Miss Hyder made the recommendation that I jump a class. So that was why, for the rest of my schooling, I was always 1 year younger than my schoolmates. I fortunately got a scholarship to go to the Scots College as a boarder. I would cry myself to sleep for the first year or two. I was so sensitive and I learned to survive, and I think that stood me in good stead. I learned that you have to play sport if you want to be accepted, mostly, and I did a lot of sport.
What about your dad's sense of hearing? How severe was it, the loss?
When people came into his shop and when they were asking for confidential items...
Like what?
Well, modus, condoms, and those confidential items. I began to learn what these meant, and I was so embarrassed I'd signal to him when I was down there that I knew where they were, so I could tell you where they are were to this day.
Is your dad's loss of hearing what got you interested in the idea of hearing?
Yes, I had planned as a 10-year-old to be a doctor and an ear, nose and throat doctor, which really surprised me because boys at that age wanted to be, in my day, R-class steam train drivers.
I wanted to be a steam train driver.
It was the masculine thing to do.
Why ear, nose and throat? Why that idea?
I really wanted to help my father and people like my father, so the ear, nose and throat side was predominant in my mind. The other reason was that he was an optician, so he used to leave and let me look at the back of some of his clients' eyes. So I got interested in medicine generally, and in those days you were an eye and ear, nose and throat doctor. So I originally planned to go to be an eye and ear, nose and throat doctor in Orange, New South Wales. That was the height of my ambition.
Orange, New South Wales?
Orange, New South Wales.
It's very specific. Why Orange? Had you ever been there?
Yes, indeed. We have relatives, the Thomas family, who pioneered the Guyong area out of Orange. So Orange was regularly on our travels.
And you never fulfilled that ambition?
No, I haven't. I started medicine in 1952 at the University of Sydney. What mattered to me was the excitement of doing medicine. It was intoxicating. I had really one main objective when I was doing my finals, and that was I wanted to make sure I didn't fail. I seemed to have done such a good job at not failing that I topped the year. It was somewhat exhilarating, but it was a come down to then go to the Royal Prince Alfred Hospital as a resident, and it really was a shock. And it was very long hours. I mean, when I did surgery, I went for about 40 hours straight without sleep even. I didn't really get too involved in the opposite sex until I was part way through my medical career. But I had the good fortune when I was in my fourth year medicine to have my sister bring home her girlfriend, Margaret, to have a day out. And there was a certain chemistry and attraction to Margaret. It wasn't till I got through this terrible run of hospital work that I had time to think again, and I realised that I really did love Margaret, and then we got engaged. So we got married 7 days later, left on the Oriana on its maiden voyage to England as our honeymoon, and I wouldn't recommend sea voyages as honeymoons. We were sick in each other's arms for most of the trip.
You went to the UK really for professional reasons. You needed to do that.
Yes, in those days, that was the place to go. We derived our medicine from England. We got our qualifications from England and Scotland, I might add, and that's where you went.
Why did you come back then?
my father had a friend who was an ear, nose and throat surgeon in Melbourne, and that offered me an opportunity to go into practice.
So that practice actually meant many operations, lots and lots of tonsillectomies and all the like.
It was really a practice about the nose, and I became, at that stage, very committed to making a nice give people nice noses. I was passionate about nose surgery.
There was a moment in time when you walked outside, sat down for lunch, and your life changed.
More or less a moment in time. It had obviously been developing, and I remember clearly sitting down next to the Royal Melbourne Hospital and pulling out a latest journal to keep myself up to date, and there was this article by Blair Simmons on his first work on a very deaf person, where he systematically studied it just to see if hearing sensations were possible. It was a very good study, but it didn't give any idea of whether this person could get speech. But that was the moment that made me decide to get all the necessary scientific background to do the job properly.
On the one hand, you have a life which is earning a lot of money and with a promise that it will. On the other hand, you've got the potential to be a student earning nothing.
Yes.
And you chose earning nothing.
I chose earning nothing, and my wife and children kindly came along for the journey. It was really earning nothing, you know. When my father's gave us his second-hand car, when that broke down, we had to go everywhere by foot or public transport. And that was a wonderful experience. I could really recommend it. You have time to think in bus queues and so on.
What did you discover?
That putting one electrode into the inner ear, like the Americans were doing, would probably not give the speech range of frequencies needed. And therefore, one would have to go and see how to put a number of electrodes in the inner ear to give the range of speech frequencies needed. Unfortunately, that came at the end of my PhD. I had no more money, no more job. I didn't know where to go. I applied to the University of Melbourne. When I heard that I'd been appointed to the chair of otolaryngology, or ear, nose and throat surgery, I was over the moon. It meant that I could get on, I hope, and do the research that was needed. I thought my problems were resolved. They were anything but resolved because I didn't have any money.
We're a bit late with the 9 o'clock total, but here it is. $267,596.
Dear Reg answered, he needed a telethon just like channels 7 and 9. The money from the telethons was really important in helping us to develop the technology to actually put the device in the first patient. People were starting to expect results, but I realised that the design was wrong.
One very important area that needs developing is the receiver and the transmitter that can actually apply these electrical stimuli to the patients.
I was pretty desperate. I went away on holidays and picked up a shell, looked like the same structure as the inner ear, and fiddled around with twigs and pieces of grass. And if the grass was flexible, the tip would actually tend to follow the curve around the tightening spiral of the cochlea.
The sound is distributed through 22 electrodes aligned around the cochlea, with the electrodes directly stimulating the auditory nerve.
In the end.
In the
End.
head.
I chose Rod Saunders because he'd only been deaf for about 18 months.
The performance of the speech processor was assessed using a number of standard audiological procedures.
Head.
Head.
Heard.
Heard.
It was, for me, the moment of truth.
Hood, I think.
That was the Holy Grail. I could do nothing more than go into the next door lab and burst into tears out of joy. And I've only rarely ever done that.
What will you do today?
Nothing.
Other doctors were pretty sceptical about you, and some were wary about sending their patients to you. Don't send them to Clark, he's dangerous.
I do understand their concern about me. The doctors were concerned about this whole issue. They were getting their information from overseas, and the overseas doctors and specialists were saying it wouldn't work, and they even had their reservations about Graeme Clark, and that was expressed through the doctors here, and I believe that some even went to the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Melbourne to have me step down as the professor.
This human drama for you must have been hugely stressful. To have colleagues say you should step down from your role is an enormous threat to your person and integrity, your whole professional life.
The lack of faith and belief and trust in their new professor was very stressful, especially as I was, at that stage, 34, 35, the youngest clinical professor in the country. I would be really quite angry, feeling unfairly criticised for doing what I believed to be right. And I would find relief through prayer and praying for those that really were trying to criticise me.
Were you ever ready to give up?
I entertained the idea at the back of my mind that if it got so bad, I would go and practice in Orange, New South Wales. But
this is the ultimate fallback, is it? To go back to the childhood dream?
That's right. No, a bit louder still.
Good morning, white lassie.
When I started with the first children in 1985, we didn't know whether if children are born deaf, whether their brains would be receptive to using electrical signals to reproduce speech. It was slow work at first, against opposition from the signing deaf community, and the criticism was very strong. And one had to contend with that. It was really draining emotionally on our whole staff.
Today's switch on is to establish one thing only. Does the technology work? Peter Searle hears.
It was not until the teachers of the deaf started to say, this is the best thing we've ever seen when it comes to helping children, that I relaxed and realised that this was something very special. I love children. We have had 5 of our own, and I made it a rule when I was at the busiest never to work on the weekends. And certainly I've never worked on Sundays. Come on, that is fantastic shot. But I do think that if you're not careful, you don't give your family as much attention as you should. But I've tried. I can't emphasise too much how supportive it is to have people really giving up their time to help you.
2 little ducks went out one day over the hill.
At the moment, people hear speech, but they don't hear the high fidelity sound as much as people with normal hearing, and they hear with difficulty and noise. Until we've achieved normal hearing, I will not be satisfied.
Quack, 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 but none of the 3 little ducks came back.
What does the cochlear ear implant offer people who've got severe hearing loss?
Real speech-like sounds. They are not just artificial Donald Duck-like sounds. That you can go to deaf schools like I have of late, and you really wouldn't know that the deaf children, severely, profoundly deaf, had any hearing problem at all.
Where does it go from here?
I'm working with a group in the University of Wollongong to use plastics and special nerve cell health proteins and actually put these plastics into the inner ear with carbon nanotubes. Carbon nanotubes are so small you can stack 1,000 next to a human hair. And what we are trying to do now is to make a bundle of electrodes that makes intimate contact with the nerves in the inner ear to try to reproduce the very fine and special patterns of excitation in the brain that gives us the sounds that we enjoy.
How did you feel about seeing placards that say things like no cochlear implants for deaf children?
At first, I was amazed. I couldn't believe it because for years I'd been striving hard to get children to hear, and most parents who had deaf children wanted their children to hear. And I do understand their point of view now, and it goes back to the time when years and years ago, deaf people were seen as deaf and dumb. You know, when my father was not well aided, we'd have people come to our home and Dad was seen as dumb, and I knew he wasn't because he couldn't get involved in the conversation.
You've been feted very widely, kings and queens.
We have been a centre of attention for a number of royal visits, and we've had the Queen of Netherlands, Prince and Princess of Japan, the Queen of Australia. I was able to introduce Rod Saunders, our first patient, who had previously stood up to the national anthem, God Save the Queen, and pull all the leads out of his equipment to the Queen herself and explain that that had caused us a certain amount of problems, but she thought it was amusing.
The ears are in between the heart and the mind. I thank Professor Clark with my heart and my mind for giving me the opportunity to live life to the fullest. Thank you.
I suppose getting us together is quite a momentous occasion to relive the last 30 years. Maybe it's like the Blues Brothers getting the team back together again.
I can't imagine my life now without dancing, enjoying music, and even listening to my parents telling me off.
The sad bit is that Rod Saunders was unable to make it. He passed away last year.
Would you have liked to have gone to the theatre tonight with the group?
Which theatre are they going to?
They're going to see Being There.
I think with great fondness of Rod Saunders and his family. In a way, it was a special relationship for a doctor to have taken someone through science, clinical risk, become a friend. I was just wondering how the family are getting on these days.
Well, they're all growing up, of course, and one learns the violin.
It was typical of Rod that he willed his body for research purposes. I did not like the thought of having to remove the device that originally I'd had planted 30 years ago. I didn't like the thought of it all. But eventually I faced this. New technologies could lead to improved visual prostheses, or bionic eye as it's been called, a relief for spinal cord injury. I'm hoping too that it might help with things like epilepsy, people with incontinence, coronary artery disease and stents needed there. It's got a whole range of applications.
So the quest goes on.
I don't think I'll ever be satisfied until people get perfect hearing.
That's a mighty ambition.
It is, but that's how it started. Perhaps a little naively, but that's been a goal. We must pursue that goal.
You must look back at your life with remarkable satisfaction.
The greatest joy of all is to see those young children hearing and communicating near normally. And to get letters from them and from their parents, it's just so moving, even to this day. It still brings me to tears.
Graeme Clark, it's been very good talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.